Welcome. Today, we're jumping into a huge idea, one that's always changing and honestly shapes just about everything, from your taxes to your healthcare. We're talking about the liberal theory of the state. So, let me ask you this. Is the state supposed to be your protector, or maybe more like a parent? Or is it just a referee, making sure everyone plays by the rules? I mean, this single question has been argued over for centuries, and the answers, well, they've completely changed how our societies are run. We're going to see how the state's job description has been rewritten again and again. Okay, so here's the plan. We're going to start at the very beginning, the philosophical origins of the state. Then we'll see how classical liberals tried to shrink it down, how positive liberals built it up into the welfare state we know, and finally, how neoliberals tried to push everything back towards the market. It's a real roller coaster, so let's dive in. All right, first things first. Before we can even get into the debate about what the state should be doing, we've got to get on the same page about what it even is. Why did we humans invent this incredibly powerful thing in the first place? Well, the classical view, which Aristotle summed up perfectly, saw the state as a totally natural part of human society. The whole point wasn't just to stop chaos, no. It was about actively helping people live a good life. The state was seen as this essential tool to help us all flourish. But then, the early liberal thinkers came along and just flipped that whole idea on its head. They ran this really cool thought experiment. They asked, hey, what was life like in a so-called state of nature, before government? And their conclusion? The state isn't natural at all. It's an invention, a deal, a rational contract we all made to fix some really specific, really annoying problems. And this is where it gets super interesting. Because, get this, how you diagnose the problem completely changes the solution you come up with. Hobbes, he imagined total violent chaos, a war of everyone against everyone. Locke, on the other hand, he saw a pretty peaceful world, but one that was just inconvenient because there was no neutral judge. And Rousseau, he pictured this lost paradise that got totally ruined the moment private property showed up. So you have these wildly different starting points. And guess what? They lead to completely different ideas about what the state should look like. For someone like Hobbes, the only way out of that war of all against all was to make a huge, unbreakable deal. He basically said, look, everyone has to agree to give up their natural rights to one all-powerful ruler, a Leviathan. And what do you get in return? Basic security. It was a pretty stark trade-off when you think about it. Your freedom for your life. Okay, so that brings us to the first big phase of liberal thought. Because if Hobbes's whole solution was about ending chaos, the next wave of thinkers got obsessed with a brand new problem. Tyranny, right? What happens when that all-powerful Leviathan you created becomes the monster? So the classical liberals looked at the state and saw the single biggest threat to individual freedom, period. Their solution? Keep it on a very short leash. They came up with this great term for it, a necessary evil. Yeah, it's necessary to enforce contracts and protect your stuff, but it's evil because every single bit of power it holds is a potential threat to your liberty. And this political idea translated directly into an economic one, laissez-faire. The core belief here was that the invisible hand of the market, well, it was just way better, way more efficient, and frankly more just than any government official could ever be at deciding who gets what. The state's job? Simple. Get out of the way. Now, this hands-off approach definitely fueled the insane growth of the Industrial Revolution, no question. But it came at a huge social cost. I mean, we're talking widespread poverty, incredibly dangerous working conditions, and shocking levels of inequality. The whole night watchman state it wasn't built to handle any of that. So the harsh reality of industrial capitalism forced a major rethink in liberal thought. A new generation of thinkers looked at the world around them and basically said, you know what? This old idea of freedom, just being left alone, it's not enough. It's totally inadequate. Yeah, writers and thinkers started pointing out all the massive social problems. They started asking some really tough questions like, what does liberty even mean to someone who's starving, or someone who can't read, or someone stuck working in a dangerous factory? They argued that real freedom isn't just about nobody stopping you from doing things. It's about having the actual ability to live a decent life. And this quote right here from T.H. Green, it just perfectly captures this huge philosophical shift. He basically took classical liberalism and turned it completely upside down. His argument was that for your rights to mean anything at all, the state can't just be a passive referee. Nope, it has to play an active role. It has to help people get over obstacles like poverty and a lack of education so they can actually, reach their potential. This new way of thinking is exactly what gave us the modern welfare state. The government wasn't just a night watchman anymore. It was now in the business of providing education, healthcare, unemployment benefits, pensions, the whole shebang. And here's the crucial part. These things weren't seen as charity. They were seen as fundamental rights that every single citizen deserved. But of course, the story doesn't end there. By the 1970s, the welfare state itself was starting to face some serious backlash. Critics were saying it had just gotten too big, too powerful, too expensive. And that pendulum of liberal thought, it started to swing hard, back in the other direction. And this is the key point. A new wave of thinkers, F.A. Hayek is probably the most famous, argued that the welfare state, even with the best intentions, had become a new kind of threat to freedom. Their claim was that all the high taxes, the endless regulations, and the centralized planning, it was all just crushing individual initiative and grinding the economy to a halt. And this whole critique was captured in one really powerful phrase they came up with: the nanny state. The idea was simple. The welfare state had stopped being a protector and had become this overbearing parent, treating its citizens like they were kids and destroying their sense of personal responsibility. So these ideas eventually solidified into a very specific policy playbook. It became known as the Washington Consensus. And the formula was pretty straightforward: cut government spending, privatize state-owned industries, slash regulations, and push for global free trade. And for decades, this was the dominant economic idea around the world. And believe me, this wasn't just some dusty academic theory. Political leaders like Margaret Thatcher in the UK and Ronald Reagan here in the US, they took this playbook and they absolutely ran with it. They put policies in place that fundamentally rolled back the welfare state and totally reshaped the global economy around free market principles. So, where does that leave us? What have we seen on this journey? The big takeaway is that there is no single, fixed, liberal view of the state. Not at all. Instead, it's this constantly changing idea, always adapting to solve whatever the biggest problem of the day is, whether that's chaos, tyranny, inequality, or even the fear of the state itself getting too powerful. Think about it. We started with that minimal night watchman state, just there to protect property. When that didn't work so well, the state grew into this active welfare provider, promising security from cradle to grave. And then, in reaction to that, the pendulum swung all the way back to a state whose main job was just clear the path for the market. Each version was a direct answer to the problems of the one that came before it. And that leaves us with one final and really crucial question. Today, we're facing these huge challenges that, let's be honest, don't seem to have easy market solutions. I'm talking about global pandemics, climate change, intense geopolitical conflict. So the question is, what new problems are going to define the next evolution of the state? And maybe more importantly, is that pendulum already starting to swing again?